Hi, this is Norman BR with the Sales Readiness Group, and today we're talking about maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. And I think it's a really interesting topic because companies invest literally billions of dollars in sales training on an annual basis. And we've come up with some really great factors that we think impact the effectiveness of programs that we'd like to share with you. As a starting point, just for those of you who are new to Sales Readiness Group, we focus on helping sales organizations improve selling skills, and that could be, foundational selling skills, which we call our comprehensive selling skills program, anywhere from prospecting to call planning to, questioning and active listening skills to identify priorities, presenting value, managing feedback, gaining commitment. And then we surround that with a layer of more advanced offerings related to advanced negotiation techniques, advanced value selling techniques, and advanced presentation skills. And then one of the fastest growing parts of our business is this very outer ring, which is really our sales management track. It's actually captured now in book form in a new book called The High Impact Sales Manager. Book's available on Amazon. But within that, we basically it's a synopsis of the training program that gets to how do you hire the best people, how do you manage your team, how do you coach the individuals, and then how do you lead and inspire that team? So again, those are some of the areas that we have offerings in. And now I want to turn our attention to today's topic on maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. So when we think about sales training, it's a pretty broad term, and this is just a breakdown from ATD that it can include selling skills, product knowledge, sales management skills, company-specific knowledge, and industry knowledge. And for purposes of this presentation, really focusing on the first and third point, selling skills and sales management skills. And together, those roughly make up about 50% of corporate America's training budgets. So again, we're going to be focusing on the skills that salespeople need to be successful and the skills that their managers need to successfully manage their teams. So often you hear the question, well, why do you train your sales team? And the most common response to that is we want to increase sales, and that's the right reason to invest in a sales training program. But when you break it down a little bit, you have to think about there's something that really sits between where the team is today and improving results, and that's changing their behaviors. So when we speak to clients, we quite often ask, so based on this training program, what will your team do differently than they're doing today? And that allows us to really pinpoint, what behaviors will change. Examples could include they'll do a better job of prospecting, which will result in more first-time appointments. They'll do a better job of call planning and, take advantage of the technologies that are available via LinkedIn, via website, via press releases, to really understand the clients, the decision makers, the key influencers, and be well prepared for that call. Another major area for improvement might be questioning skills. Salespeople need to be very skilled at asking questions that really sound conversational in nature. And so it's not designed to be an interrogation of the prospective customer, but really a conversation with the customer where you're using different questions to really understand what their priorities, and mainly and equally important, using listening skills. So, without going to every single selling skill, I think the key here is really figuring out what behaviors are going to change as a result of the sales training. Now, we have some nice statistics. It's actually in a report run by CSO Insights called the Business Case for Sales Training. And it was a report we sponsored about a year ago, but it shows a very, very strong correlation between companies that have training programs that exceed expectations versus those companies that have training programs that need improvement. And some of the stats that we've pulled from this report include percent of reps achieving quota much higher, percent of deals won also higher, and I think this third one is really key. The third and fourth actually, to differentiate offerings with so much of it information now available to prospective customers on the web. A lot of times we hear from clients is that their offerings are often getting commoditized. So the ability to differentiate your offerings or your solutions is really key for being able to sustain margins and improve win rates. And also, companies that typically have really good programs actually have much lower turnover rates. So there's a pretty strong correlation between the investment in sales training and the types of results we're seeing on the slide. If anyone would like a copy of the full report, you can simply download it off our website. There's an address here you could go to, and you can see the full copy of the report. It's pretty interesting. And also, I think it answers the question, is sales training effective? And I think the answer is it can be. It can be very effective, but some of the common complaints are, we didn't see an increase in sales, we didn't change sales behaviors, and training didn't stick. And there's some pretty obvious answers, why that can occur, and I'll just go through a few of those. One of them might be unrealistic expectations. You really have to think about, as I was mentioning before, what behaviors are going to change. Another problem might be is we're having an annual event, a company's having an annual event, they decide they should do some training, so they just bring in someone who's a pretty good motivational speaker, they call that training, but they really didn't have specific objectives. What will salespeople do differently as a result of the training? Salespeople may not have been motivated. Maybe you have a veteran team, they don't think they need it, so they're just kind of tune out. They show up, but they're checking their email, they're going out and checking their voicemails, really not engaged. Another problem is, kind of flip side of that, there's not enough executive buy-in. The executives are really not explaining why the training is relevant and important, and really, personally being invested in the training. As I mentioned before, a lot of training is one-time events without reinforcement, and so we really want to think about training to be effective as training that's programmatic in nature, and I'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but really is well thought through in terms of what's going to happen before the training occurs, what's going to happen during the training, and what kind of reinforcement is going to happen to support the training. So you really see both skills application and ongoing skills adoption as a result of the training investment. And so with that, I want to get into the 5 key factors I mentioned that we found that really can make training quite successful. And at a high level, they're motivation, customization, space learning, reinforcement, and measurement. And I'll touch on each of these areas. So let me break down motivation into 2 parts. We mentioned a couple of slides ago about the participants being motivated. That's what I would call internal motivation, where the learners themselves are motivated. And some of the techniques to do that would include pre-training skills assessments. We often do that in fact, we almost always do that with our programs, where the participants get to assess themselves in terms of skills, and they'll see that there are gaps and areas they can improve in. Personal development plans, oftentimes managers will put together personal development plans. Is actually part of a program we run called Managing Sales Performance, where salespeople have personal development plans, and then the training aligns with their personal development. Salespeople also like to be recognized. One way to do that is through post-training certification. So it's really important to have a plan that's focused on getting the learners engaged. And this is what I would, again, refer to as part of the before piece. The other aspect of that is really the external motivation, which comes from their managers and executive sponsorship. And we've been really fortunate to have some really great executives sponsor the training. I can think of one CEO of a public company who recorded a video and sent out that video to all the participants explaining why it was important, how it related to the company's initiatives. I can think of another company, pretty large public company also, where it was a program for their sales managers, and the CEO and COO attended the training sessions. And you can imagine the participants are really engaged when they're a senior audience. But at a minimum, we would want to see a pre-training communication by the senior executives explaining why the company is investing in sales training and how it's relevant, to make sure that there really is a partnership as it relates to the ongoing reinforcement, that it's not a one-time event. And the best way to do that is to get the frontline sales managers involved, because ultimately the team's only going to have so much time with internal or third-party training professionals, but they're going to work with their managers on a day-to-day basis. So having their managers actually attend the training with their teams and learning how to coach to the training is really essential from a external motivation standpoint. So again, item number one, motivation, internal and external. Second item that's really important is customization. And customization really gets to relevancy. Salespeople want to know immediately, and they're pretty smart, very smart actually, whether something applies or doesn't apply to them. And so the first aspect of that is really the pre-training consultation, which is an opportunity to really understand the customer, their goals, and the expectations. And one of the best ways we found is, intake interviews, and those could occur at a number of different levels. Maybe some intake interviews that would include senior executives. What are the business goals? Maybe some interviews with training professionals and frontline managers to really understand what the skill gaps are. Even talking to top performers or going on ride-alongs and listening into calls, but really having enough information to understand the kind of the day in the life of the sales professional, what the goals of the program are, and what behaviors are going to change as a result of that program. And so by doing a really good job of listening and kind of recording, you can become very conversational in the company itself, the business goals, and the training objectives. And then that leads to actual program content. And you want to make sure that you're not just using off-the-shelf content, but that the content is aligned with the business goals, that it really zeroes in on the specific skills gaps that were identified either through assessment, through intake interviews, or both, that there's customized role plays, and there's really good skills application exercises, and even the look and feel of the presentations themselves. We quite often use our company's branding and styles as part of the presentation, so that it not only kind of internally feels like a customized program, but also externally has an immediate appearance that this is something that was prepared for their sales organization. So we've talked about motivation, we've talked about customization, and those two are really things that happen before the training begins. Now let's talk about the during piece. And the during really gets to this idea that of spaced learning. And it's about not just running training events, but really thinking about a plan where that training content can be chunked out. That may be the assessment piece is done online before the training begins. Maybe there's a pre-training webinar with kind of a quick reference guide, kind of highlighting all the key aspects of the training. Then there might be a couple of maybe a 1 or 2 day on-site session where you go through the key skills, you go through the application exercises, the role playing, and then you have a series of maybe live online reinforcement sessions. But the technology is great, even like the technology we're using right now on Bright Talk, really conducive to sharing information in ways where it's not all confined to the classroom. And this is really a key with adult learners. It wasn't necessarily possible, even to the extent it is today 5 or 10 years ago, which is we don't want people to think like they're learning from, drinking from a fire hose. We want to space out that learning and space out the reinforcement, which I'll talk about next, in a way where they can really digest the key concepts and have time to apply the new skills that they're learning. And some of those technologies include, traditional classroom training. So you want to have really rich graphics that are interesting, great participant workbooks, great role plays, customized exercises, discussions. Also have the ability to train virtually, and the virtual instructor-led classroom platforms are very robust and can be used before and after the training, which gives you blended programs. And more we're seeing the need for on-demand, e-learning, both as a primer as part of maybe onboarding programs, and also as a really good reinforcer after training, so people can quickly go in and review key skill sets. In our opinion, the best programs do incorporate spaced learning and are definitely blended programs. So again, we've covered now motivation, customization, spaced learning. This is by far what we found to be the most important aspect of making sure that the training does result in a sustainable skills improvement, and that's reinforcement. And so the best training programs have embedded within there a reinforcement plan that can include tools and job aids. And these tools and job aids should no longer be just constrained to paper-based files, but they should be in the form of e-tools or maybe even incorporated. I was with a client where they've taken some of these e-tools and actually embedded them in their CRM systems, so they're really easy to use and easy to access. Reinforcement sessions, in our programs we typically run reinforcement 30, 60, and 90 days after training in the form of 90-minute live online reinforcement sessions. Personalized coaching sessions, really a great role for the manager to really zero in on a couple of key skill areas for improvement and focus on those areas. On-demand e-learning, as I mentioned, both as a primer and reinforcer. And also quizzes, and there's some really nice platforms where you can get into some quizzes that really are more like sales simulations and really engage the learners. So again, it's important to have a reinforcement plan that incorporates some of these techniques, and most importantly, incorporates ongoing coaching by the manager. Again, as I mentioned before, the sales manager spends more time with the team members than anyone else. So the number one way they can influence team, we call it leverage, is by working with each individual. And the leverage factor gets into if the average, sales manager has, somewhere between 7 and 10 reports, to the extent they can just improve skills a little bit across each member of their team, they're going to see a pretty significant increase in overall results. Some of the key areas to really think about is, does your organization have a coaching culture? And that really means making sure that coaching is something that's not remedial in any way, but is really there for the benefit of the sales professionals. People want to be coached, even top performers. In some companies, even CEOs have coaches. So we want to really make sure that it's something that's cooperative and seen as a positive. Sales simulations are great. If you can't actually get out on a call, it's better to practice in the office than to practice in front of the customer. Call observation is great as long as the manager is truly observing. If the manager is going in there and doing most of the selling, they may close a business, which isn't a bad thing, but they're truly not coaching. So want to make sure there's enough calls where they're really in observation mode. Coaching conferences, those can be even held on the phone. If someone's working on their questioning skills, hey, well, how did that go today, Norman? What questions did he ask? I'm curious, what did he hear? What did he learn from the customer? And also creation of personal development plans. And these plans would be set for each member of their team and maybe focus on just one or two key skill areas for improvement quarterly. And we found that our clients who've taken that approach really do see improvement, and then they're able to reset the plans on a quarterly basis. I'm going to go back to that report I showed earlier by CSO Insights and just kind of show the correlation here now between when there's a really strong coaching culture or coaching programs and the percent of revenue attainment by the sales team. So again, really strong correlation between stronger coaching programs and better sales results. But coaching, doesn't come without its challenges. Sometimes managers don't know how to coach, so they end up telling people what to do instead of really providing a much more cooperative environment where they're coaching people on what to do. They may not coach the right people. They may be trying to coach consistent underperformers, and that can become a really big time sink. And we found that the best allocation of time is really coaching the middle, because if you can move the middle, you're going to make huge progress. They may not have a consistent coaching process, which really means that there probably hasn't been a coaching program. And the process helps them become very effective in how they coach. And also in larger organizations leads to great consistency in terms of how the coaching is performed. And then, as I mentioned before on the coaching culture, we don't want the coaching to come across as remedial or confrontational. So if coaching is only offered when someone isn't doing a good job, back to that, the issue of coaching bottom performers, that is exactly how it's going to be interpreted. So really want to make sure that it's very collaborative. The salespeople are invested in the coaching, and there are coaching plans that are agreed to by the salesperson and their manager on a quarterly basis. Which brings us to our fifth area. So we've covered, again, just to recap, the four areas of motivation, customization, spaced learning, and reinforcement. And now we want to get to our final area of measurement. And so we talked earlier in this presentation about looking for behavior change. So one of the key things is really at the outset of the training is to really figure out what will salespeople do differently and how will it affect their behaviors. And if we improve these behaviors, what would we expect to see in the form of business results? And some of those areas could be like improved ramp-up time for new salespeople, more first-time appointments with new customers, higher win rates. But to really understand if the behaviors change, you can run some really nice post-training assessments. You can have sales simulations. And we think the best way is really through field observation by having the managers observe the salespeople in action and see if they're actually doing a better job than they used to of performing those selling skills and the underlying behaviors. And then making sure that the sales reps are held accountable, and that gets back to the reinforcement plan. So with that, just to recap, we've talked now about 5 key areas. We've talked about motivation, customization, space learning, reinforcement, and then reverse engineering so that we can really measure the impact of the overall training program. With that, a couple of key takeaways. Clearly define your training objectives. Really important to understand where you're going. Focus on motivation, both internal motivation for the learners, external motivations from your managers and senior executives. Customize for relevancy, and that includes both consultation to really understand the situation and what you're trying to work on, and then building customized role plays and scenarios and really aligning the program with the skill gaps. Leveraging spaced learning to really develop a comprehensive program that has a really strong before, during, and after component. Reinforce the training, particularly through coaching by the managers. And at the outset, create some very realistic metrics so you can measure training results. So that's kind of our thoughts on maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. And if you'd like to learn more, please contact us. I'll put up some information for that. You can also download our white paper on maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. It goes into detail on each of the 5 areas that we've covered. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. So we post all of our blogs, even our video blogs, to LinkedIn. So a lot of, I think really strong content available through us. Most importantly, if you have questions or are interested in learning more, give us a call or contact us, and we'd love to have a conversation and see if we could be helpful in some way as you look to maximize the effectiveness of your sales training. So with that, thank you very much, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you at some point in the future. Take care. Hi, this is Norman BR with the Sales Readiness Group, and today we're talking about maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. And I think it's a really interesting topic because companies invest literally billions of dollars in sales training on an annual basis. And we've come up with some really great factors that we think impact the effectiveness of programs that we'd like to share with you. As a starting point, just for those of you who are new to Sales Readiness Group, we focus on helping sales organizations improve selling skills, and that could be, foundational selling skills, which we call our comprehensive selling skills program, anywhere from prospecting to call planning skills. And together, those roughly make up about 50% of corporate America's training budgets. So again, we're going to be focusing on the skills that salespeople need to be successful and the skills that their managers need to successfully manage their teams. So often you hear the question, why do you train your sales team? And the most common response to that is we want to increase sales, and that's the right reason to invest in a sales training program. But when you break it down a little bit, you have to think about there's something that really sits between where the team is today and improving results, and that's changing their behaviors. So when we speak to clients, we quite often ask, so based on this training program, what will your team do differently than they're doing today. And that allows us to really pinpoint, what behaviors will change. Examples could include they'll do a better job of prospecting, which will result in more first-time appointments. They'll do a better job of call planning and, take advantage of the technologies that are available via LinkedIn, via website, via press releases, to really understand the clients, the decision makers, the key influencers, and be well prepared for that call. Another major area for improvement might be questioning skills. Salespeople to questioning and active listening skills to identify priorities, presenting value, managing feedback, gaining commitment. And then we surround that with a layer of more advanced offerings related to advanced negotiation techniques, advanced value selling techniques, and advanced presentation skills. And then one of the fastest growing parts of our business is this very outer ring, which is really our sales management track. It's actually captured now in book form in a new book called The High Impact Sales Manager. Book's available on Amazon. But within that, we basically it's a synopsis of the training program that gets to how do you hire the best people, how do you manage your team, how do you coach the individuals, and then how do you lead and inspire that team. So again, those are some of the areas that we have offerings in. And now I want to turn our attention to today's topic on maximizing the effectiveness of sales training. So when we think about sales training, it's a pretty broad term, and this is just a breakdown from ATD that it can include selling skills, product knowledge, sales management skills, company-specific knowledge, and industry knowledge. And for purposes of this presentation, really focusing on the first and third point, selling skills and sales management.